Hello, NFT land. Hello, Whale community. Welcome to another segment of a very, very epic episode of Whale FM. I am absolutely honored and thrilled today to have two amazing guests to talk about artificial intelligence as well as NFTs. In September of 2021, Dr. Li Kai-Fu and Mr. Chen Qiufan launched an amazing book called AI 2041, whereby they speak about the future of AI over the next 20 years by using stories, short stories, along with analysis. It really humanizes and makes it very easy to understand the impact of how AI is going to affect everybody in the near future. Given that, a very epic collaboration has also happened since the launch of the book. I am thrilled to welcome in Xin Li, who is the co-founder of TRLabs, and they together with AI 2041 are going to be doing a very epic NFT drop in the very near future. So without further ado, I'd love to give a brief introduction of both our honorable guests today, starting with Dr. Li. Dr. Li is a very, I've mentioned Dr. Li is a rock star, a superstar in the business world in Asia, as well as in artificial intelligence. He is the CEO of Sinovation Ventures and a New York Times bestselling author of AI Superpowers. Mr. Li, welcome to Whale FM. Would you like to say hello and introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Thanks very much for inviting me. I've been working on AI for over 40 years, and it's exciting to finally see it come to fruition. My day job is I'm the chairman and CEO of Sinovation Ventures. We invest in AI and other technologies, mainly in China.
We are truly honored to have you here with us, Mr. Li. Again, I've been a huge fan of your career since coming to China in 2009. In Twitter, I was just talking about how excited I've been to speak with you since 7 p.m. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
The next guest that we have is a friend of Whale, and she's been on many of our streams, bringing all those amazing insights, as well as the amazing projects that have been launching on TRLab. Welcoming Miss Cindy Cohen. She is the co-founder and chairwoman of TRLabs, a new platform for discovering and collecting NFT art from the world's leading artists. Li Xing, welcome back again to Whale FN. Always amazing to see you, always amazing to speak to you. Why don't you give a shout out to the Whale community and introduce yourself for those who haven't seen you before?
Hi, thank you, WhaleShark, and also the Whales Fund, and for having me back again. So I'm Cindy Cohen, and co-founder and the chairwoman of TRLab. So I've been working in the traditional art field for more than decades. So I'm also the executive deputy chairman at Christie's, and I'm very happy to be back here.
Always an honor to have you back, Li Xing. And, again, bringing those insights, even with the drops with Cai Guoqiang, amazing artists, amazing art coming in, and, just really bringing a large amount of diversity, not only from a global basis, but also from an intellectual basis as well. I am so thrilled to be able to have this discussion today. AI, like NFTs, is something extremely close to my heart. And so what we're going to do is, before we end this introduction, we are going to talk about AI 2041, the book. I was very fortunate enough, and Dr. Li, you wouldn't believe this, but AI 2041 was actually sold out at my local bookstore. I actually managed to grab the very last copy a few days ago, and I've been spending my time reading through it, savoring every single page. It is just such a fantastic read that I would highly recommend and advise that anybody who has the opportunity or has an interest in understanding how our lives are going to be revolutionized by artificial intelligence, to pick up a copy and to actually use it as nightly reading. It is truly an amazing read. So before we begin, why don't we have an icebreaker here? Because a lot of our audience today, they don't really understand, what is artificial intelligence, because, they might understand basically what it does, but what they don't understand is that we are interacting with it on a day-to-day basis. So a question to Dr. Li, the very first one, is how would you define artificial intelligence? And where can our viewers see the use of artificial intelligence in their everyday lives today?
Sure. Artificial intelligence is a term coined over 60 years ago. It was intended to cover the entire field of understanding our intelligence and how machines can possibly replicate and extend beyond it. But what has actually happened is that we understand very little about how our intelligence was developed and how it works. Instead, a fantastic algorithm known as deep learning became the runaway success. And while it is not so much similar to our thinking, it can do many things that we do and many things that we cannot do. The fundamental engine of deep learning, which is sometimes synonymously used with artificial intelligence, is that it's a mathematical network where you feed many, many examples of data, and it can generalize and optimize certain objective functions. So if you feed it images, it can learn to recognize dogs and cats. If you tell it ahead of time which are dog, which are cats, it'll learn to separate them apart. If you send it people who've borrowed a loan and defaulted, and people who borrowed a loan and paid back, and with their data like their salaries and address and so on, it will learn what people are likely to default, what people are likely to pay back. Over the past 5 years, deep learning has really grown tremendously. It has learned to play Go. It has learned to recognize MRI images for tumor better than people. It has learned to do reading comprehension better than people. It has learned to recognize images better than people. It drives better than people on highways, and it's really essentially being infused into everything around us. Probably you interacted the most when you use Facebook, how the news feed is ordered and sent to you, or how a TikTok or a Snapchat shows you content is targeted and personalized towards you. That's why you see things that you find irresistible to continue to click and watch. So all internet applications pretty much have it. Many financial institutions begin to have it, and we're beginning to see advanced versions in speech recognition that has perception and image recognition. When you use Alexa, when you use Siri, you're interacting with it. When Gmail auto completes your sentences, that's AI at work. So it is really all around us. And soon we will be seeing even more advanced applications like robotics and autonomous vehicles. That's already starting to happen. And it's a generic omni-use technology that will be connected and fed into every imaginable application and industry. And every time you feed it in, it will be more efficient and useful than the previous technologies, whether it was done by humans or by previous technologies. So it's like a wildfire that is similar to electricity being used in every imaginable industry.
Fantastic. So actually, every single one of our viewers and every single one of our listeners here today is already interacting with AI whenever they go online, whenever they use their cell phone. I mean, to a certain extent, Dr. Lee, I understand that certain cell phones now have dedicated artificial intelligence chips, right? To be able to increase that power. Having been in the AI industry and seeing it being a very niche and very exploratory industry, and now moving to the point, as you put, it's omnipresent, it's pervasive throughout our daily lives. What has the reaction to your work been over the last couple of decades, where you've been pioneering this idea where AI can really help and drive humanity?
Yes. In my early days, 40 years ago, I was just overly optimistic about when it would work. And just as I slowed down and did not promote AI that much, deep learning was invented. So I'm back on my evangelical role, and I see a lot of opportunities. And actually, in my first book, AI Superpowers, I talked about a couple of key points, I think, which are now being demonstrated as we speak here. I talked about how AI is not just the algorithm, but even more importantly, huge amount of data. And it is that huge amount of data that drives up the computing requirements. As you mentioned, that's why we have new chips. We've probably all heard some of the new AI technologies require $100 million computers, and it's certainly the case. So my premise in AI superpowers was, one, data is the new oil. Two, China has lots of data, lots of people, so it will rise to become an AI superpower. And we will see China ahead in certain areas like robotics, because there's a need to automate so many factories, while the US will drive ahead with enterprise AI because of the advanced state of the American enterprise software. When I published the book 3.5 years ago, people were somewhat skeptical, but I think we now see these have all come to pass. And AI 2041 is an attempt to make further predictions about how more data, more compute, and more algorithms will take AI into every imaginable sector, from healthcare to education to commerce, to logistics, to warehouses, to manufacturing, and really disrupt and or become infused and combined with existing businesses to save costs, increase margin, improve efficiency, and potentially even disrupt the existing process of how things are done.
Truly a thought pioneer in this field. And, as all of the audience might have seen from my earlier tweets, I've been a huge fan of AI myself, as well as been embedded in the AI community for the last 6 years. And to Dr. Lee's point, using artificial intelligence in retail is a perfect example of how everyone is adopting, not only AI for image recognition, right, to understand exactly what products are placed on what shelf and where, but also using AI and big data to be able to understand what is the optimal positioning and the optimal layout for a store to be able to drive traffic and to be able to drive purchase. Dr. Lee, you provided a perfect segue into what we're about to speak next on, which is the book itself, which is AI 2041. So I bought this book a couple of days ago. Once again, extremely, extremely lucky to pick up the very last copy in one of the largest bookstores in Hong Kong. Have been reading it every single free moment that I have. And Dr. Lee, it is also my bedtime reading as well. So I actually absolutely love the stories for many different reasons, right? But I guess I would like to ask first, and for those of you who have not been able to see excerpts or haven't picked up the book yet, it has a very unique format. Essentially, the way that AI 2041 moves is Dr. Lee and Stanley, they look far into the future, and there are a variety of short stories that talk about how artificial intelligence has enriched or has integrated itself with the lives of the everyday person, not only in America, not only in Korea, not only in India, but all across the world, right? And these are fantastic stories that, again, they're just so international and they're so in depth that I found myself fascinated by every single one of them. On top of that, Dr. Lee, what you guys do after the short stories is you provide an analysis and an explainer in terms of, the technology and really bringing it down to an understandable level for your readers. So my first question to you pertaining to AI 2041 would be, how did this unique format of the book, the short stories plus the analysis, come about?
Well, I thought of the idea because I wanted everyone to understand AI because it's so important. And yet many people find it intimidating. And I've already exhausted my personal talent and capabilities in AI superpowers to make complex technology understandable as much as possible. So I felt to make it any more engaging, I would need a great writer, a fiction writer, who could turn these into stories where people can read easily, become engrossed, engaged, and even entertained by the stories and feel like they're a part of the story and the story could happen to them. And only then will they find that connection with AI. So I sought out Stanley to write the story, to write the book with me. And then we brainstormed on the format. We settled on 10 stories. And we wanted the 10 stories to each have around 2 to 3 technologies, so that I could explain them later, and also to be in a different industry and in a different country to really project the belief that AI will disrupt all industries and AI will be universal for the whole earth. It's not just US and China. So that's why we came up with this kind of outline and format. And for people who like to read the stories, they can do that and just skim the tech description. People who want the reverse, they can also do that. Whichever way you do, by the end of the book, if you read it, at least the stories very closely, and or the technology analysis very closely, you will have essentially completed a basic course on AI and understand what it is and what it can and cannot do, and whether to believe the media when it says AI will bring all kinds of problems, and also know that there are things we can do to deal with the problems and not become all negative, like sometimes the media is about AI.
Dr. Lee, I can attest to that. Dr. Lee, the only request that I have is I wish I had read your book 6 years ago when I first started an AI company. The level of the speed that I could catch up on the different applications of artificial intelligence is extremely clear, not only within the stories itself, but also within the analysis. The analysis is actually created for the layman who can just read through it and really understand how AI works with big data, how AI works with speech recognition, how AI works with deep fakes. I love that story, by the way. But out of all of those, probably right now, and I've gone through about halfway, 3/4 through the book. Again, I'm savoring every single page. My favorite story is probably Twin Sparrows, right? And Twin Sparrows basically speaks about a pair of twins in Korea who are in an orphanage, and basically twins genetically identical, but interact with their AI companions in a very, very different manner, right? I mean, the story isn't only intelligent, but also heartwarming. This actually leads me to my next question for you is, when I look at every one of these stories, I mean, it's amazing how much diversity in language, diversity in themes, diversity in, I would just sentiment each story has. Why was it important? And why was it important for these stories to have different cultural settings? And how did you leverage that to address your individual visions for artificial intelligence?
Well, I think Stanley gets most of the credit for that. There are a couple of reasons for picking the diversity in the world. I think one, as I mentioned, is just to show that the whole world faces the same opportunities and problems. Maybe some developed countries faster, maybe some poorer countries later, but we all have the same issues, and AI can solve all kinds of problems and create new ones for all of us. The second thing is that I think because Stanley's creativity is immense, and I think working with me, constrained to project what AI will look like in 20 years, means he can't just go wild with technology. There's some things I would say, hey, that's not feasible in 20 years. So he would like to take his creativity elsewhere. And I think he found a very good outlet by doing extensive research on countries and embedding the culture, language, country-specific issues into the book to make it even more engaging. So those were I think the main reasons for putting in 10 different countries. And I think the reaction has been overwhelmingly positive that he has chosen this path.
I can tell you this, as someone who has lived in many of the cultures and spent much time in each of the countries that Stanley uses as an example, I can tell you from a writing perspective, he managed to capture the intricacies of the culture of the people in each and every single one of those stories, right? When you read about India, you're talking about matchmaking. When you talk about Nigeria, you're talking about the deepfakes. When you talk about Korea, again, you're talking about that bond between family. It's just amazing how he managed to identify each one of those themes. So again, I'm a huge fan of what he did there. Dr. Lee, you mentioned something just now in your answer about the way that AI is sometimes framed in the mainstream media, right? So,
Yeah.
sometimes AI does get a bad rep. And coming from the artificial intelligence community myself, when you tell someone you work in AI, and I don't know, Dr. Lee, if you have the same thing, the very first thing that they ask you is, so is Skynet coming? Are we going to are we going to go to Terminator? Is the world going to end and we're going to all get run by robots? Now, one of the things here is that I thought that maybe we take the opportunity from, the world's leading expert and really set the record straight in terms of what exactly artificial intelligence can do. So, and again, you bring up some of these scenarios, right, that embrace AI with optimism as well as caution, right? Can we have a brief explanation to the listeners today in terms of, number one, what is the difference between the way that AI is being used today? So probably I would classify that as narrow AI. What is the possibility for the evolution to general AI, right? Which is one step closer to Skynet. And is super AI even possible?
Okay. Well, as I described, AI today is taking lots of data and using human direction to learn about how to classify or decide or predict key things within the application. So that is called artificial narrow intelligence. So it needs to be applied. It's applied in one domain at a time, and it's able to optimize, and it does not generalize to become intelligent about everything that's imaginable. And artificial general intelligence is usually used to describe an intelligence that's so powerful that it's equivalent to humans. And then artificial super intelligence would be something like a Skynet, something that's powerful, has self-awareness and desires, and it's just so intelligent that it way surpasses human capabilities. And a leading figure in AI, Ray Kurzweil, has been credited for coming up with the word singularity, in which he projected AI would reach AGI and perhaps even super intelligence within the next 15 years. And I'm in the opposite camp. I don't believe that's possible. And I think part of his reasoning is sound, which is that AI uses more data, more compute, and is improving year over year, and that can be an exponential growth. And exponential growth at some point will leave human beings behind. I think the issue with that logic is first the data and the compute are getting faster, but the algorithms also need to improve in order to fully take advantage of the exponential curve. But the algorithms have not been growing at nearly the same speed. I think the other thing is that purely using data, can it really become a superset of human capabilities? That is an unknown. And we can make some projections. We can project speech recognition getting more accurate every year. We can project machine translation getting more accurate, reading comprehension getting more accurate, image recognition getting more accurate. That's all projectable, and that's a combination of data, compute, and algorithms. But what we don't know is how to do something that we have zero. That is, AI today has zero self-awareness and therefore zero desire and zero emotion. And while it can fake some of it, it doesn't feel any of that. So without that, how is it going to have a desire to subjugate human beings and become Skynet? And also, AI cannot create itself. AI cannot create brand new things that didn't exist before. AI is very good at optimizing. If you tell it, hey, here are a bunch of people who repaid the loan, here are a bunch of people who defaulted, build something that separates them, it can do that. And if you say, hey, come up with the idea of default yourself, invent a new way to do banking, doesn't know how to do that. So the human creativity, whether in business or in science or human creativity in the arts, is just not yet something that AI can do. AI can copy a Van Gogh style or a Monet style or a Mozart style, but it can't make a new Picasso or Mozart. So these are the gaps. And if we study human, we don't actually even understand how humans become creative, how humans have emotion, how humans have feelings and self-awareness. And without these, we have nowhere to begin to build artificial general intelligence or super intelligence. So what I believe in 20 years will happen, as described in the book, is that if there is a circle today that represents human capabilities, there's another circle representing AI, and there's a substantial overlap because AI looks like it's intelligent. And what I project is the AI circle will grow so big, very big, much larger than human, because it can learn from data, it can improve itself. But there are many innate things about human that we have no idea where to begin yet today. Creativity, self-awareness, emotion, and compassion, and empathy, and love. We have nowhere where to begin. We don't know where to begin. So I think it would be irresponsible to project that AI will understand, encompass, and fully have an innate capability to do those things in 20 years, because we have nowhere to begin. It's not like speech recognition improving accuracy or giving loans reducing default rate. So my projection is there will be no artificial general intelligence in 20 years. However, AI will be immensely more powerful than people in many, many things that it does that human cannot do, but not those few things that define us as humans. I would project that in 20 years, we would not have an AI that can do that.
I am sure that after hearing that, the audience is very relieved that the entire world will not be subjugated by robots in 20 years. And honestly, working in the AI field myself, and actually, working with PhDs who build out the deep learning models and everything like that, it is very much at a time where it's, like you said, very domain focused, rather than moving towards a general intelligence status. But given that while Skynet is highly unlikely to happen, really there are some drawbacks or some potential drawbacks that could be faced by the use of AI. And my second favorite story in the book is the golden elephant, right? And again, you guys have to read this book because again, it provides so much insight and dichotomy in terms of the way that AI can be used. But not to give any spoilers, basically the golden elephant talks about how their actions are controlled by a insurance AI that estimates their insurance premiums based on their background and based on what they do, right, Dr. Lee? So what are the potential drawbacks, or what are the potential cautions that we need to look out for, very similar to what you saw in the story of the golden elephant, in order to make sure that AI really is something that liberates us further rather than subjugating us to forcing us to do what might be just the only rational action?
Yeah, AI has a lot of so-called externalities, which is because it is so good at optimizing its objective function, it single-mindedly does that, sometimes at the expense of hurting other things. So, a social network or a video app could keep showing us content that will get us hooked because it's optimizing on the most views or most revenue. But in so doing, it might be showing us video that isn't good for us in the long term. So that would be one externality. And another one is fairness. If you train it on the wrong and biased data, it could build a bias against a certain gender, race, or sexual preference. And also AI has issues with explainability. It makes really good decisions, but it can't yet tell you in ways that are convincing to us why it made those decisions. And that could be a problem, especially in medicine, healthcare, and autonomous vehicles. And these externalities, I think, are main issues that we have to solve. And I think the technologists should be given a chance to solve the externalities, because if we look historically, every great technology breakthrough, whether it's electricity or the internet, had problems. And then technologists came up with solutions. For example, electricity could electrocute people, but then we invented circuit breakers. Internet connected to PCs could cause viruses, but then we invented antivirus software. So I believe each one of these issues, and also issues like personal data protection, can all be addressed with technology to a significant extent. And whatever it cannot do, we can probably have regulations that can deal with it. So that combination, I think, will overcome most of the externalities.
Perfect. And before we talk about the collaboration between AI 2041 and TRLabs, I'd like to ask one last question about AI 2041, Dr. Lee. What do you hope the readers will take away from the book in terms of how our individual futures may be increasingly assisted or impacted by artificial intelligence?
I hope people will take away the following things. One is AI will really change the world and disrupt many industries. Two, therefore, you should understand AI and figure out how it can help you and how to avoid mistakes of going into directions and careers that could be potentially displaced by AI. And three, AI is a neutral technology and will generally tend to be good for people, like all technology platforms. If AI ever does bad things, it's because of the people behind it. And lastly, I think AI will have many lasting benefits, and we will have some challenges in the interim. Some jobs may be displaced, there may be some externalities, but if we think about AI as a phenomenal tool that will take over routine work, then it will really liberate us from all the routine work and let us work on what we love. And if we are able to really use AI and infuse it into every industry, it can provide so much wealth and perhaps lift us into the era of plenitude, where there really is enough for everyone, and that poverty and hunger can perhaps in our lifetime just go away.
Perfect. And again, if you guys have not had a chance to read AI 2041 yet, I highly advise that you do so. When you look at the business landscape today, there are mainly three industries that are really driving the growth of, human innovation and human progress. It's artificial intelligence, blockchain technology, and biotech, right? Those are the three on the forefront of this. And really having a basic understanding of artificial intelligence is extremely important for every single person who lives in this world today, because as we pointed out earlier on, all of you are already interacting with artificial intelligence, whether you know it or not. Now, we'll move on to the second topic, and I will be asking a couple of questions to Li Xing, because there is an epic collaboration that's happening here. And not only is it with this amazing book, and their authors, but it's also with art, right? So, Li Xing, I'd love to ask you the very first question in how did this crossover digital art project between AI 2041 and TRLabs come about?
Well, first of all, I want to thanks to Dr. Lee. It was such, for the brief half hour, I got so much to learn about AI. And so it was a joint discussion between Stanley and Dr. Lee and the TRLab when Stanley's team approached us, sent us the summary of the book and just see if we have any idea about engaging artists for the NFT. I think it's very natural because of, the book is talking about in 20 years what will happen and what AI means to us. And meanwhile, this year, the whole world, we're facing NFT, crypto, blockchain, especially after the Beeple NFT sale. So in the art world, it's a big bomb. So this is like for when we were reading the summary and we have this idea about engaging all the digital artists. And after, we spoke maybe over 10 artists, and some artists, most artists show a big interest because I think it's so aligned with what they do. Because all the digital artists, they use machine learning, they use computer algorithm. It's like their daily life already. So for them, it's very familiar subject to them. So we basically get response like immediately if their schedule available. And so we're very lucky, and we already announced 5 digital artists, and many artists I think you already know. Also, you introduced a few artists to us, and thank you for that.
It really is my pleasure, Li Xing. And I think this partnership is so timely because when you look at traditional art collecting has been about collecting a painting, a physical painting, framing it, and putting it on the wall. Now, what happens with the advent of NFTs is all of a sudden it's placed scarcity, ownership, and true management on digital art. Now, when you think about digital art, naturally one can think about taking a photo of a piece of art and calling, hey, I took a photo and that's digital art. But there's something that's very native, right, to digital art, which is called generative art, right? And so when you look at the market today and you look at the number of artists or generative artists who are using, algorithms or even using artificial intelligence to create these wonderful works of art, I just think that this collaboration is extremely, extremely timely. Now, given that you hinted a little bit that you have 5 artists, might I ask you, which artists are involved with creating NFT artworks inspired by the book, and how are they using the book as its vision for inspiration?
We already announced 5 artists, including Nice Graphic and Brandon Davis. And thanks to you for the introduction.
Oh, my pleasure.
And Ash Thorpe, Rafik Anadol, and Joshua Davis, also known as a PlayStation. So we basically gave all the freedom to the artists, and there's no limit. And in terms of their creation, inspiration, they can choose from 1 or 2 stories or the whole book. And I think we want to respect their creativity. And also every artist read the book and they basically read very, once we send the book and in 2 days, they already said, oh my God, this is exactly, what we've been thinking and what's inspired us. And I want to do this. So everybody had their own idea, and we want to just provide that platform for them.
That is amazing.
So we will see very exciting artworks.
I am sure we will. I mean, that lineup is simply some of the best digital artists in the space today. When you look at some of these names, I mean, Rafik Anadol just launched an amazing exhibition in Hong Kong, broke all of the records. Again, using photos from outer space, and then after that, using a Google AI algorithm to generate the experience that he's providing to his audience. Simply amazing. Now, again, I know that everything that TRLabs does, you guys like to build a strong community and a strong following around it. So might I ask you, how is TRLabs helping to build a community around the book and the artworks? And what are some of the ways that the readers and collectors can become more engaged as the project continues?
So first, we did a book club, and also we gave away some books a few weeks ago and started a weekly book club discussion at TRLab Discord, and where we have awesome community members analyzing Dr. Li and Stanley's writing. And one member even posted and responded with answers that were written by AI. So it was very interesting to read. And, it's like you here talking about in 20 years, what's going to happen. But as Dr. Li said, actually the AI is around us. It's in our everyday life. Sometimes we don't even realize. And so we also have, I'm sure you're familiar with Whitelist raffle. So we basically gonna, every Sunday, we're gonna have a hint of which artist gonna be the next drop. And by Monday, TRLab will officially reveal the artist and the work. So we also open the whitelist raffles. And by Thursday, we will have 24 hours early access sale on Thursdays. But to be on the whitelist, you have to crack a secret code, which, answering questions, and you need to participate in the community activities throughout the week. And from looking out for hints on TRLab's Discord, also to following artist Twitter, and also to listening into our weekly artist AMA partnership with Whale. And thank you again. So we are also doing this to avoid bots, so which has been, out of control.
That is amazing. And again, if you guys do want to be involved in this very, very epic launch, you guys do need to join the TRLabs Discord. Our moderators will post the TRLabs Discord address in the Discord itself, to Li-Xing's point.
And we start from this Sunday, October 24th.
Fantastic. So Li-Xing, we have the TRLab's website, the TRLab website up here. Again, it looks beautiful. It looks very mysterious. When will the commission NFTs be available, and how will they be offered for sale?
So that from on the 24th on Sunday, we will have the hint, and you need to go on TRLab's Discord, and also, as I mentioned before, join the community. And so on Monday, we will reveal. So this upcoming Sunday, so stay on TRLab. And I also want to mention, with this whole collaboration between Stanley and Dr. Li on the AI 2041, we also engaged and working with Rani Pirovano, so who has a deep knowledge in the traditional art world and the digital art world. So he has been a curator for many exhibitions. And so we are very honored to have him as the curator for this project, adding another layer to the mix to bring everything together. And you will read a lot of things about, what he think about the project, about the artists, about the works. So it's going to be very interesting.
I can't wait. Again, these two topics, NFTs and AI, are so close to my heart. And a merger of the both, it's going to be epic. It is going to be amazing to see the birth of these creations. We do want to make sure that we are respecting the time for both guests. So we will have a hard stop probably at 10:55 to 11 p.m. Essentially, what I want to do now is, before ending off, I do want to make sure that the community has a chance to ask some of the questions that they have. And Dr. Li, to my earlier point, do you see the number of questions that you have on Skynet? So I think Dr. Li did do an extremely good job of explaining to people why Skynet will not be here in 2041. I am also in Dr. Li's camp, and having, again, used artificial intelligence on a daily basis for the last 6 years, I do not think we need to be worried about being subjugated by the machine race. But there are some other questions out there that are extremely interesting. So why don't I hit on one first? So this is a question from for Dr. Li. Hold on one second here. I'm scrolling up because we have way too many. Okay. Dr. Li, have we reached a point where AI can replicate nuanced decision-making or understand semantics?
Nuanced decision-making, I think if it's represented in the data, then yes. If it's completely invisible from the data, then no. So if you can gather a lot of features, so let's say you want to make a loan decision-making AI, and you're able to gather a lot of data from the user, perhaps not only their income, address, what job they have, how much they make, and how much is their rent, do they own a house, what jobs have they held before, also their marriage status and public records, and perhaps also some of their phone usage, like what kind of phone do they use, what kind of apps they use, and so on and so forth. Then I would say you're in a position to be able to make very nuanced decisions in that case. But also perhaps there could also be issues with privacy in that case. And also there are dangers like the golden elephant story. So I think the answer is yes, as long as you're able to use extensive data from each of the users. Yeah, so about understanding semantics, that's a tough one because I think based on a lot of the behavior of the AI that you see, like many of you have probably tried GPT-3, it would be hard to say that it doesn't understand semantics when it can do such a good job in writing a story or biography or answering any question. It would seem like it does understand semantics, but actually no human taught it semantics. It was all learned from the data. So that's a very tough question to answer. I think it will exhibit that it often understands semantics, but it was never taught that way. It was just all learned from the data. And also one last caveat is that it will make mistakes, and it does make mistakes. If you've seen some of the data generated by GPT-3 and software like that, some answers are quite ridiculous. So we're nowhere close to being able to mimic the human semantic understanding. But there are many cases that it will give uncannily great answers that we would not be able to tell it's a machine and not a human.
Perfect. Our member Hurricane thanks you for that response. And someone else has brought up another question. So, Dr. Lee, just now you spoke about the way that routine jobs, or I guess more manual labor and jobs like that exist today, might very well be taken over by artificial intelligence and robotics, right? What are the jobs of the future? For our children, for our grandchildren, if people don't want to become redundant in 2041, what should people be learning, and how do people exist in that sort of a society?
Right. First, the clarification. When I say routine jobs, I don't just mean blue-collar routine jobs. I also mean white-collar routine jobs. For people that who are pushing paper or doing repetitive jobs like telemarketing, telesales, people who are repeatedly, filing expense report, doing the job of an assistant. Many of those jobs, or maybe within a job, many of the tasks within the job will be automated. You just have to look at RPA. A very good proxy is RPA. RPA is robotic process automation. It's a piece of software that's installed on the workers' computers. It learns what workers do, and it takes over parts of the job that people do. So watching what domains and jobs and tasks RPA is being applied is a pretty good proxy for what routine white-collar work would get displaced. I think white-collar, blue-collar routine job will get displaced simultaneously. They're about equal numbers, equal challenges. So the thing to do is to think about a couple of things. First, what are the things that AI probably cannot do for 20 more years? And those will have to do, on the one side, with strategy, creativity, analytical thinking, cross-domain thinking. On the other hand, it will have to do with soft skills, winning trust from other people, empathy, compassion, teamwork, communication skills. So these are the things to enhance. And in terms of the total number of jobs, probably the former, there won't be that many scientists and CEO jobs available, but the latter, there will be a lot of human-centric service jobs that will be available. Taking healthcare services as an example, the world will probably lack somewhere between 10 to 15 million people in healthcare services, partly because they're not very well paid and desirable today, but they will be in the future if the supply and demand becomes mismatched, because people don't want to be taken care of by an AI or robot. So a lot of services jobs, I think, will be in high demand. Also, there will be a lot of need for human services. The prices of goods will come down, so people will pay a premium for services. So a good concierge, a good bartender, a good tour guide are all potentially good service jobs to have. Also, there will be jobs that will be created by AI. We can't really predict what these will be. We know today that includes things like data scientists, people who manipulate data, cleanse data, who process data, label data, because that's kind of the big thing, because AI needs data. But there will be many other jobs in the future that will come that way. And then lastly, whatever jobs you have, be on the watch out for AI-infused tools. So if you're a reporter, look for the next tool that will help you do the job of reporting, journalism. The same thing with accountants and lawyers. AI will be infused into tools that will become symbiotic with you and help you amplify your capabilities and do your job better. And that is another key advice for people who are especially in the professional areas.
Amazing advice from Dr. Lee for all of you. I know that a lot of our viewers are extremely young, as well as a lot of you are in your middle age with growing children. So that is amazing advice, how to future-proof your careers as we move into an AI period. We have about 4 minutes left. I'm only going to use 3, so I will ask a final question to both Dr. Lee as well as Lee Sing. So, one of the biggest creators within the digital art space is an anonymous creator called Pak, who also created the curatorial AI called Archilect on Twitter. So essentially, it is the world's first and largest art curator based on artificial intelligence. My question to both of you is: at what point is the creator of art the machine rather than the human? And how do you see human beings able to add to the creative process in the future when artificial intelligence can become the ultimate curator? I'll pose this question to Dr. Lee first, and then after that, we'll have Lee Sing and end this session off. Dr. Lee, please proceed.
Yeah, I think for many types of art, music, painting, and so on, AI will do a very decent job that many regular people can't tell the difference. And that will be, art that hangs on people's family rooms, maybe hotel rooms, but the true creators will, I believe, will be humans for a long time to come, because AI is very good at emulating mechanical, at customizing, but it's not really good in expressiveness. And I like to believe that art is one of those things, at least at the high end, that it is you got to feel the human connection and emotion and let that come through in the work. And that until AI has that, it will be an exceptional copier, emulator, and integrator, but not a true artist.
Dr. Lee, we have some of the world's largest digital artists viewing this session right now, and I can tell you that you just won yourself a whole bunch of new fans. So thank you very much for that answer. Again, creativity, the spark of creativity, it's rare, it's humane, it's human, a perfect answer. Lee Sing, with the launch, again, with this launch upcoming, where do you think the role of the artist is in the use of computational algorithms and AI? How does the artist continue to stand out?
I think a great artist is gonna be, either 100 years ago or 100 years later. It's because the human emotion, and that's the AI. So at the moment they don't have it, and so I'm 100% great with Dr. Lee. So there will be a print, you hang in the hotel room, on lobbies. Those can be done by AI, probably very soon. But the masterpieces will be created by the creators and by the artists.
That is perfect. I hear cheers all around the world. Guys, we've just hit 10:59, 11. Want to respect the time of our 2 VIPs today. Dr. Lee, Lee Sing, thank you so much for joining us on Whale FM today. I know that the entire crowd really loved your insights and your opinions. Guys, make sure you buy the book AI 2041. Check it out. You need to learn about artificial intelligence. It is going to be the driver for our future existence. And make sure you swing by the TRLab Discord to participate in this very epic collaboration between AI 2041 and TRLabs. Dr. Lee, Lee Sing, thank you again for your time. I'm so honored to have been here today with both of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.